maybe not too far. Exotic drinks we'd like you to try. Dance away the night at the Tiki Lounge. Welcome to Tiki Lounge. I'm Merrell Fankhauser. I was recently contacted by the family of Glenn MacArthur, who owned Glenn Records, the label I was on from 1964 to 1967. And to my surprise, they found several boxes of my old records and unreleased master tapes. Here's what happened when we traveled to the high desert of Antelope Valley. You're watching Tiki Lounge, and I'm Merrell Fankhauser, and right now we're up in the Mojave Desert at the little town of Rosamond, and we heard a rumor from Daniel Portillo that there were some of my old records from 1964 up here, and I couldn't believe it. And right now I'm happy to say I'm standing with the son of Glenn Records, Glenn MacArthur, and I'm with Glenn MacArthur Jr. It's great to be here and see you today.
Thank you.
I remember you as a youngster when we were recording in your dad's studio and you were playing out there in the patio.
Yeah, it was good times.
So do you remember anything about the different people that recorded in your studio and some of the names of the people?
Yeah, I believe Buck Owens was there, and Willie Nelson, Ricky Nelson, and one of the guys from the Righteous Brothers.
Mm-hmm. Bill Medley.
Bill Medley, yeah, he was there. And George Weston was there. He was a good friend of my dad's, and he recorded a lot there.
Yeah, I like George's songs. He was a great guy, and he was really very creative. Well, you know, my band, Merrell and the Exiles, recorded in there quite a bit, and I'd come up with a new song about every 2 weeks, and your dad would record it, put it on the shelf, and then go, oh, that's a good one, and he'd put it out. And he put out my first vocal that I ever wrote that we recorded at the beginning of 1964 called Too Many Heartbreaks with Please Be Mine on the flip side.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, and that one made it to number 9 on the local KUTY radio station.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. They're bringing back some good memories.
Yeah, we had some good times recording in that little desert studio. And your dad and that studio ended up kind of being famous, especially in the record collector, people, because he ended up in 1967 taking all of my old recordings that he had on the shelf, and he never put an album out. He'd only put out singles on all these people, and he put a whole album out. And I had changed the name of the band by then, and I changed it from Merrell and the Exiles to Fapardokly. And he goes, Fapper, what? What does that mean, And I said, well, I just took the first two letters of the last names of everybody in the band and made up this name because it was the psychedelic era, and it sounded more psychedelic than Merrell and the Exiles.
That's how that came to pass. I wondered that one.
Yeah, that's how that happened. So he put a lot of our early Merrell and the Exiles songs on there, and then also some of the newer stuff we did as Fapardokly. And that album came out, and it got on some radio stations and down in L.A., and I think even in places like Indiana and Ohio, and then sort of drifted away. He sold a few hundred copies or so, and we never heard anything about it. But, the record collectors and everything, they know all about this stuff. And your dad's name, I don't know if you know this, has been mentioned in some British magazines and even in some magazines and books. And the Antelope Valley became kind of famous as a place where there were a lot of musicians because Captain Beefheart's band was from here, and Frank Zappa was originally from here. So the Antelope Valley has kind of a rich history of music, and a British guy, a journalist, came over and visited me once, and he wanted to come and see this area so bad. So I took him over to Sweetbriar, where the old studio was in Palmdale, and he was taking pictures and just going, this is fabulous, fabulous. And then I took him all the way up here to Roseman and Mojave, and we went out to Red Rock Canyon and took some pictures. So I can't tell you, seeing you is like visiting with your dad again. And the last time I saw him, I think, was about 1992. He came over to the coast and visited me.
Well, he passed away in 1999, the summer of 99. And I've been hauling these records around, and we figured out how to get them to you. And here you are.
Here we are. And thanks to Daniel, who found me on the internet and emailed me, and I couldn't believe it. He said, yeah, I've got these records. And I said, well, how did you get them? And he said, well, my stepdad, Glenn Jr. MacArthur, gave them to me. And thanks to you, Glenn, for hauling them around all these years.
Well, you're lucky they didn't wind up in the trash.
Yeah, because, it's hard for records and tapes, and especially out here, things want to warp. And they always say, keep it in a cool, dry place and store them up on end like a library.
Well, we've been moving around, and they've been in the sheds and garages and everywhere we go, and it's time to move them to you.
Thank you. And I do remember one time your dad said he'd moved out this way, and he stored all of his old stuff in a freezer truck.
Yeah, but it got pretty hot inside.
Yeah.
But that's out in Mojave, and it gets really hot out here. It was up to 115 this summer.
Oh.
So it gets warm out here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for doing this interview, and thanks for saving these records, and we'll go through them now and see what's left.
Well, let's have some fun.
All right. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Okay, here we are with Daniel Portillo, and thanks to Daniel, he found me on the internet and told me he had these old records and tapes of mine from back in 1964. Daniel, thank you so much for having the initiative to find me.
Oh, no problem.
So did you know any of the history of the bands or anything from your stepdad?
To be honest, we spoke a little bit about it. I really didn't know much about you, to be honest. Carla Weston, which is George Weston's son, came over to pick up some of her records because her father passed. And once we went through all the records, I started finding your name everywhere and just started pulling out all your records.
I see. So did you then look me up on the internet, and how did you find me exactly? Went to my website or what?
Yeah, I found your website. I just Googled your name and didn't take long to find your website, and then emailed you, and then now we're here.
Thank you very much. And over 400 albums and 400 songs and 40 some albums. I'm still going, and I can't believe it, that record companies keep putting this out. And there's such a thing about this 60s music that everybody still loves. Do you listen to any 60s music?
A little bit. I more of stick to like mid 80s and 90s music.
Okay. And you're a musician, right?
Yes, I've been playing the guitar for about 7-8 years.
Good for you. All right, Daniel, pleasure to meet you, and
Pleasure to
thanks
meet
you
you.
so much for getting me and Glenn Jr. together.
You're quite welcome.
We're out at Fox Field in Lancaster, California right now, and right now in back of me is the building that I used to practice with Merrell and the Exiles back in 1964 and 65, because I worked here on this airport, and my dad ran the air service here.
Well, I wanna be free. Don't bother me. Leave me alone. Won't you go on home? 'Cause I told you once before, I don't love you anymore. And this is for you. When you're all alone. And this is for you. When you have no home, don't you call on me, 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 don't you call on me. Well, you waited for me, you waited all night long. Wow! Well, you took all my money and you ran around with every boy in this old town. And I'll tell you once more, I don't love you anymore. And this is for you when you're all alone. And this is for you when you had no home. Don't you call on me, 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 don't you call on me. Well, you waited for me, you waited all night long. Wow!
You're watching Tiki Lounge, and I'm Merrell Fankhauser. Right now, I'm here with two of my dear old friends and fellow musicians. we played in a band together, Merrell and the Exiles, in 1964. And to my left, I have John Lear, who was known back in the music business in those days as drummer Danny Martin, and to his left, the piano man extraordinaire John Day. You guys, this is amazing. I mean, the two of you haven't seen each other in 45 years, and you and I haven't seen each other in about 38. I mean, you guys haven't changed a bit.
Well, sure we have. We're losing our hair and everything else.
Quite a bit.
You're supposed to agree with me and say, no, we look really good, man. But you know what? I was telling you, I remember rehearsing with you and you playing the piano and everything, and it just felt like it was a couple of days ago, and how all of that time has gone by. And now some of those songs that we did are very valued collector's items from Merrell and the Exiles, especially the ones on Glen Records. What do you recollect, Dan, from...
I still have the record.
But what do you remember from those recording sessions that we did out there in the desert at Glen Records?
What I can remember was a small recording studio, and myself and the drums were put way back in the corner and stacked up. I think didn't he have a cockpit or something to separate us off of a jet plane in there?
Exactly. The singer sang behind a canopy that he got from Edwards, and John can tell us exactly what that was.
Yeah, that was a canopy off of an F-86 fighter that was sitting there in the garage. And that's where the studio was a garage. It was converted. And I remember he had egg cartons, the egg crates stapled on the walls. And I don't remember air conditioning because it got real hot in there. And he was always having us do take after take after take. And it got to where we were just getting exhausted from the heat and from doing the songs over and over and over and over again to get them all just right.
It was a real challenge. I remember being the lead singer because I'd have to sing a song 12 or 13 times, and you got that desert dust out there and the heat, and after a while your voice was completely worn out. And I hear those recordings now, and I'm amazed at how young we all were. We were teenagers, and how we actually pulled it off, and it sounded that good, and some of our songs got on the charts.
I remember when we did Don't Call on Me, and I don't remember what the reason was, but I didn't get to do some rehearsals with you. And the first time I actually heard it was the night before. We went the next day to record it, and we got in the studio, and you guys did your part the way it was supposed to be. And we get down to the end almost every time, and I blow it. And we had to, like you were talking about, redo the thing over and over again. And finally, if you ever really listen to the 45 record, at the very end of it, after we did the final cut that they accepted, right at the very end, just as soon as we were done with the last lick of the music on it, I looked over to you and says, "Now, how was that?" And if you listen to the song, you had to cut that off. So as soon as the thing was over, you heard this click at the end of the record to shut me off, so I wouldn't be on there.
So it cut your "how was that" off.
Oh yeah, finally, yeah, because I'd screwed it up at that end. But yes.
But I was telling John earlier today, I loved his little piano part.
Yes.
It's like a signature on the end, da 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 da, and then you followed up with a drum roll, da 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 da, and everybody loved that part of the record, and the way it ended.
And we did that. We figured that out. Right there when we were recording it, remember?
Yeah.
First thing we did was the song was too long. At that time, if you remember, most of your songs had to be 3 minutes or less.
No less, 2.5.
Well, yeah.
After 2.5, they had to pay you double airplay.
Is that what it
time
was?
On the radio.
I knew we were way too long, and so you didn't have a finish for this. So John and I just said, well, let's just kind of fake it, which we did at the end of that to finish off the tune. He did a little, I just follow through with it.
It came out great.
You just looked at each other, I just kind of nods. Okay, fine, let's stop it now.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
It was a classic ad lib. It really was.
It turned out
Really was good. And then, little did we know that later on Glenn would take a lot of the takes of stuff we recorded that he had on the shelf. And he put them out in about 1967, and I'd moved back over from the desert to the coast where we are now, and I had renamed this band a psychedelic name. I dropped Merrell and the Exiles and called it Fapardokly. Well, he put this album out, Fapardokly, and he took a lot of those takes that we had done, and he took one song in particular that was released as a 45 called Sorry for Yourself, that John did a great organ part on. And
John was good.
yeah.
I used to love playing.
And, you know, now I was telling you guys, a guy in Germany, Golly McCry, has done a tribute album to me. And he's covered some of those rare songs that we recorded then that sat on a shelf for 40 years. And he heard them because they got out in the 90s on a German LP. And he was telling me in an email just yesterday how John's organ part on Sorry for Yourself, when he heard it in the 90s, inspired him to listen to more Merrell and the Exiles songs, and he started learning the songs that way. Do you have any humorous stories that you can remember? I know John does, about one time we played
Okay, well, we were playing a dance at Jane Reynolds Park
in Lancaster.
in Lancaster, and naturally it was all teenagers there, and we had a packed hall. And Jim Ferguson, the bass player, had a pack of matches in his pocket, and somehow, it was in one of the real fast songs, somehow that book of matches caught fire. And his pants pocket was smoking and flaming, and he's standing on stage jumping around trying to put his pants out.
Well, it's been great talking to you guys again after all these years, and thanks a lot, you guys.
You bet.
You're welcome.
Two of the original members of the Exiles right here today, Dan Martin and John Day, and I'm Merrell Fankhauser. You're watching Tiki Lounge, and I'm Merrell Fankhauser, and right now it is my pleasure to present to you Carla Weston, the daughter of the great rockabilly singer George Weston, who had his days in the late 50s and 60s. Carla, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm just so glad to be here.
It's fun. We've been communicating through emails now, and you're all the way back in Kentucky for a few months.
Exactly. It's just, we've just been having fun talking on the email and just pulling this all together and just getting it all sorted out. And now I'm here. I'm here, everybody.
You're here. And we both went out to the high desert a few months back, around October.
Yeah.
And the archives of Glen Records were found, and your dad and I were both on Glen Records in the early 60s. He was a Glen artist before I was, and they found some of our unreleased master tapes and some of my first vocal single that I did in 1964. What was it like when you went there and you saw that box of those two-track reel masters?
I was flabbergasted. I was so on a high. It was just amazing. I spent over 11 hours just sorting through everything. Wow. And it was just like, I don't even remember anything. It was just so wonderful. Pictures, reels, records. It was like a gold mine. And I just couldn't, it was just emotional for me, you know? So it was just the greatest day ever to find that.
Wow, yeah, I was there a month or so after you were, a couple of weeks maybe, and they told me you had just been there. And then when I looked over at this box of my stuff, and there was all these singles that were still in the boxes that was leftover stock in this box of master tapes, I couldn't believe it. And when I brought it home and cleaned the tapes and started playing it, and I heard songs that I knew it was me singing, and I had written the songs, but I had forgotten them. I mean, we're talking close to 50 years.
Yeah.
I couldn't even believe
isn't
that.
Amazing. Can you imagine it's still here? And we found it?
I can't believe that they played for one thing, and
Yeah, because there was that they were telling us they may not be able to play because of being in that weather, the hot desert, that they may just disintegrate, once we get them on the reel. So I was like really worried about that. But you know what? It's all good right now, isn't it? So far, we've
Exactly.
got all positive.
And
on
I've
that.
managed to
amazing.
master 22 of your dad's songs on the early years and beyond, and it is a wonderful album. And the thing is that Glenn MacArthur, who owned Glenn Records, had put it all in a freezer truck and moved it out, way out from Palmdale to Rosamond, and I think he had some land closer to Mojave.
Gold mine. He opened up a gold mine. He built a gold mine, and that's where it's at.
Okay, so it was all in this truck for years, but not with any refrigeration.
No.
And it's amazing that it kept. And I told you, when I cleaned my reels, there was all this desert sand coming off, and I was afraid to put it on the machine. I thought, oh my gosh, these may never play. But a few of them, the ends of them fell apart a little bit, and
Right.
they're brittle. The splices kept breaking in between songs, and I had to carefully splice them together. But I managed to get a dozen unreleased songs that I didn't even know were there. And your dad's CD is just great, and you had all those great pictures of him from back in the day.
And Glenn, we didn't have any pictures of Glenn, so that was amazing to be
Yeah.
able to put all that together and get that on the CD. And you have some also. So you and I got connected, and it was like everything just fell into place. It was just like wild. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't you think that?
Oh yeah, it's really something. And then you had this brilliant idea to have a sort of a tribute to your dad and a reunion of some of the 60s musicians from the Antelope Valley area, from Lancaster and Palmdale. And that is actually going to happen July 19th. It's going to be the
This year.
the Antelope Valley 60s band George Weston tribute. And
At the Hilton. We're going to have it at the Hilton Garden Inn in Palmdale off of Rancho Vista Road. So everybody get ready. It's going to be awesome. We're going to rock and roll. It's all great.
it'll be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that night. And of
I'm
course,
just excited. I can't stand it. Aren't you?
yeah, waiting for July to come around. We're going to have our crew there and video it for Tiki Lounge too.
It's neat.
So-
It's neat. We've come a long way, Merle.
We've come a long way, and
Good stuff.
and we're going to have a lot of fun. And I'm so pleased to meet George's daughter, because I told you I loved your dad's sense of humor. And one time we were recording in Glenn's studio, and we got finished with Merrell and the Exiles, and he came out, picked up an acoustic guitar and started doing Elvis songs, and we were all just jumping around the room. And of course, Glenn didn't turn on the machine, or he ran out of tape, probably.
Right.
So none of that got recorded. But Carla, thank you so much for coming all the way out here from Kentucky and being on the show, and for putting all of this together. It's just amazing.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting
Yes.
you and loving you. And my dad loved you so much, and he thought you were amazing also. And it's just been great. This has been a great, great time.
Thank you.